today. I'm excited to present Simplify Professional Licensing for Architectural Engineering and Construction Firms today because so many firms across the United States share a fundamental challenge: how to meet all regulatory requirements faced by AEC firms across the country. Perhaps your firm is facing difficulties maintaining and renewing licenses and managing qualifying engineers. Maybe you're looking to operate, hire, or employ people in other states, and perhaps you feel like reacting and responding, not leading your forms through these events. It's even more important when new business opportunities arise, since firms need to be in good standing to bid on new jobs. I'm here to tell you that you're not alone and to share our expertise in maintaining multi-state compliance. Before we get started, two brief housekeeping items. First, we have a relatively large number of attendees on the call today. For that reason, the audience will be muted. Second, a reminder that today's presentation is eligible for continuing education credit through Earmark, so I'll go over how to get your CE credit at the end of the presentation. So to start, my name is Jordan Sonopoli. I am an account executive here at Harbor Compliance. My email address is listed here. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you think of a question after the call, whether that's today, tomorrow, or in the future. I'll also show my contact information again at the end of the webinar. A little bit about Harbor Compliance. We're experts in architectural engineering and contractor licensing. Since 2012, we've helped over 40,000 clients simplify navigating regulatory requirements. In the AEC industry alone, we have helped over 8,700 AEC firms apply for, secure, and maintain license, business lifecycle, and tax requirements. More about us later, but for now, we have to cover a lot, so let's dive in. First, on today's agenda, we're going to cover the benefits of compliance and how it helps your firm strategically. Then we'll discuss what to expect in AEC firm licensing. This ties closely to the business entity issues that arise from firms expanding into new jurisdictions. Because these are regulated at the state level and even local levels, we'll keep the discussion broad enough to address key concepts, but we'll illustrate a few examples that multi-state firms and many of you may be facing. We'll discuss the comprehensive management solution that firms need to comply with all regulations, avoid potential issues, and mitigate risk, and how, with a proactive approach, firms can be better primed to compete. So enjoy the benefits of comprehensive compliance. Many of you probably already understand the importance of licensing compliance, but if you're a licensed architect or engineer, you've been maintaining a license since you graduated college. But it's essential to also consider how maintaining compliance can create value for your firm. One of the things that we'll cover in today is why firms need to focus on both individual and firm licenses to maintain good standing, and how those two things are connected. There are plenty of reasons why compliance is important beyond just being a law. It unlocks opportunities. For example, organizations commonly list the states where they're licensed to operate on their websites to highlight their reach and expertise. It enables firms to pursue new business, meet their timelines, and gain an edge over competitors that haven't been as proactive. It safeguards your firm's reputation. Staying in good standing avoids penalties and avoids damaging how your firm is perceived. And it upholds the overall professional standards of architects, engineers, and contractors. So there are clear benefits, but what does the licensing process actually look like? So diving into licensing basics, as professionals, you already know the basics of licensing. You know, the AEC firms are regulated by state and local agencies for public safety reasons. Licensing helps build public trust that bridges and buildings around us safe and sound. You know that the licensing process requires engineers and architects to complete professional education, sit for proficiency exams, and help keep up to date with continuing education credits, which they then report to the state licensing boards as part of renewing their licenses. You probably also know that firms also face licensing requirements. Before companies can apply for these licenses, known as certificates of authorization, they need to ensure that their legal entities meet certain requirements around naming, business structure, and ownership. Once those prerequisites are met, they have to register the legal entity with the Secretary of State, and importantly, they have to select at least one qualified individual as a professional and responsible charge, aka qualifier, when applying for those AEC licenses. From that point, both the firm and the individual need to renew their licenses regularly, and the legal entity needs to maintain registration with the Secretary of State or local equivalent. The link between the qualifier licenses and the firm certificate of authorization is absolutely key. If the qualifier fails to maintain their license, it puts the entire firm's ability to transact business in that jurisdiction at risk. Jurisdictions and independence. Something that's vital to recognize is that even though each state might have its own unique requirements, which we'll dig deeper into later, they don't exist in a vacuum. In fact, nearly every licensing board asks about legal and financial penalties occurring in their states. That means that if you fail to complete your regular licensing requirements in one state, the damage can spread to everywhere you do business. In other words, when you lose good standing in one state, you might lose your eligibility to apply for licenses elsewhere. Then we're going to move on to managing qualifiers. I like to start with one of our four most common challenges that we see in managing AEC licenses, managing those qualifiers, securing new licenses, managing the renewals, and monitoring changes to requirements. Let's dive in with managing the individual license of the professionals tied to your certificates of authorization. These are referred by a lot of different names, such as professionals in responsible charge, managing agent, qualifying professional, etc. For simplicity, we will use the catch-all term qualifiers. A qualifier is a licensed individual designated on your firm's license as being responsible for your firm's work in that state. As the saying goes, there is the license on the line. Managing qualifiers is critical for businesses because, as we outlined before, the licensure of individuals directly impacts the overall standing of the firm's license. This quote from the state of Illinois illustrates how important this is. The design firm will become inoperable for all professions if the license of even one managing agent becomes inactive or not renewed. That's why it's essential to be on top of every single license for professional responsible charge at your firm. In most states, without a license qualifier, the firm's initial license application will be denied. Also, any change in the qualifier's information or a change in qualifier altogether must be reported within a short period of time. Usually that's within 30 days, but in some states, it could be as few as 10. Now we know that changes in qualifiers can happen for all kinds of innocuous reasons, such as an individual moving home addresses. They can also happen for more significant reasons, such as an individual departing the firm through retirement, resignation, or probably the best case for that individual is winning the lottery. Whether these changes are sudden or expected, firm management needs to be ready to update state licensing boards. If an existing qualifier leaves and no one holds the proper state license, someone is going to have to sit for the exam. And if the firm does not report the change, states can and do assess several severe penalties for operating without a design qualifier, up to denial of the firm's right to practice. Since nearly every licensing board asks about legal and financial action recurring in other states, the damage can spread across all the businesses and all the business and range from financial to reputational and everything in between. This is why managing qualifiers is mission critical for the firm. Here, what you can do to meet this challenge proactively. Know your qualifiers will be designed for each business entity in each state. Many states issue licenses to specific areas of specialty, such as structural versus mechanical for engineers and residential versus commercial for contractors. Firms that practice in multiple areas across states need to know the licenses for each. When attempting to register in a new state, this means any qualifiers generally must be licensed in advance. Firms must be proactive. No one wants to miss a key opportunity because a qualifier was not licensed in time. Next, ask your team, do you know your firm's qualifiers, who your firm's qualifiers are currently, in which states and entities they are acting in that capacity? If that person leaves the firm tomorrow, who could fill the role within a few weeks or even days? Answering those questions will identify any gaps you need to address. Lapsed licenses may incur penalties to reinstate, so it's better to tackle those types of issues head on. Once your licenses are in order, work to identify individuals who could step in as a replacement qualifier. Firms should work towards having a contingency plan, especially in key jurisdictions. And you must consider the state processing time. We'll talk more about this, but you probably already know that the licensure involves multiple agencies. Many licensing boards have only a handful of staff or meet on an infrequent basis, such as monthly. Expediting an application simply may not be possible regardless of who handles their submission. The state of New York, for example, can take upwards of 4 months to approve the formation of a design professional corporation, and that's assuming everything was submitted in exact accordance with the state's rigorous standards. As a result, management must take a significantly longer term view with respect to licensing. Compliance becomes integral to the firm's ability to pursue out-of-state opportunities, as well as to maintain the right to practice on an ongoing basis. It is simply not possible to react and attempt to pursue licensure in response to an opportunity. Most times, that opportunity will have passed. Finally, much like managing firm licenses, firms need to invest in a way to manage qualifiers. An ideal solution includes software to track qualifier information across states, giving management immediate visibility into who is licensed where, and producing an actionable list of tasks wherever a departure occurs or is imminent. Securing new licenses. So the next area I want to dig into is applying for professional licensure in the first place. There are over 800 state and local licensing requirements across the US. Researching and understand the varying requirements for each license type, each jurisdiction is a massive challenge. Each state may have business and licensing regulations with certain prerequisites, involving firm licenses, individual qualifier licenses, and entity registration. It's important to understand the order in which license applications and supporting documents must be submitted. And not only do you need to apply for and secure these licenses, but you need to communicate them to the rest of the firm. The marketing team wants to submit bids, but they can't bid in states where the firm isn't registered yet, isn't licensed. You need to make sure that they have a clear insight into where they are already licensed so that they can act on new opportunities. Similarly, HR might want to hire employees in a new state, but they don't know whether the firm is already licensed there. So many might miss out on highly touted recruits. I should say many talented candidates, not recruits. This isn't college football. State by state variations. One of the most common times that firms need to obtain new licenses is when they're expanding into other states, which brings us to the topic of foreign qualification. When registering for foreign qualification, the exact requirements can vary tremendously, and AEC firms are particularly susceptible to hyper-specific restrictions. Well, I really struggled through that sentence. I apologize there. First off, different states can structure the processes differently and have varying forms that need to be filled with the appropriate state agencies. Secretary of State, Department of Revenue, and licensing boards, all before beginning to transact business. Because of these differences, there can be a huge variation in processing times and expected approval timelines. We'll take a look at an example of that in just a minute. It's important to research each state's process and the order of operations between agencies when registering the business in another state, which we'll dive into in a minute. We'll dive into a lot in a minute. Um, AEC firms face business structure requirements when foreign qualifying too. You're probably familiar with certain professional entity types like professional corporation, professional association, or PLLC, more commonly known as professional limited liability company. Professional agencies are registered and named at the state level, and the requirements also differ from state to state. In addition, many states have distinct entity name requirements for AE firms. In most states, only companies that are authorized to practice architectural engineering are able to use those terms in their legal names. Other states actually require that licensed firm use those terms in their name. For firms that are originally formed in states that don't require one of those words, they may need an assumed name in the new foreign state. That includes that term in order to comply. And the forced assumed name must be used in state on everything from tax accounts, firm licenses, and even contracts and invoices. As a matter of consumer protection, states want the principals of AEC firms operating in their states to be licensed, hence qualified to run the practice. States have varying ownership thresholds. That's one more thing you have to consider when expanding your business. And while you're entering all the new states, don't forget about tax registrations. As you go through the process of expansion, it becomes more and more challenging to lean on different tools and vendors. Centralizing your licenses via one platform can make the expansion process far easier, so you always know where to find the correct information. You can see the QR code on the screen there now. We put together a comprehensive guide to foreign qualification, so it's definitely a useful resource that we have. I'm going to go ahead and throw a poll up. Um, Participation is not mandatory, but it's encouraged and asked if possible. Let me go ahead and launch that now. It's a yes or no question. The question is, does your firm need or plan to register in additional states within the next 6 months? Give me some time to enter the answers in here, and I'll leave this up for another minute. And I got half the class here has answered. Guess I can do a little better than that. Let's try to get most. Let's try to get the majority here. Leave this up for another minute or so. All right, we'll go ahead and end that poll now. Show the results for a second. You can see most of you right now in the next 6 months don't plan to expand at all. Some are going to expand. Thank you for participation in that. Go ahead and move forward with the presentation. So as I alluded to earlier, firms need to fully understand the order of entity structure, naming, and ownership requirements before attempting to register or pursue licensure in a new state, because the order of operations between state agencies vary. In some states, like New York, an engineering firm actually has to begin the process of licensure with the state education department before it registers with the Department of State. But in others, like South Carolina, the entity registration happens before the firm applies for its license. And in most states, at least one qualifier must first have their individual professional license. With all these different requirements and restrictions, many firms end up creating new entities for their work in different states. That can allow them to better meet the structuring and naming requirements for each jurisdiction. Next, timeline to enter a new state. Let's take a closer look at what it actually looks like to obtain licensure in a new state. In this case, New York again. Here's an example of a fast-growing Maryland-based firm. They had an employee starting in the state of New York in a month. In New York, foreign registration with the Department of State can take several weeks on its own. To set up the domestic design professional corporation can take months. Coupled with the time it takes the Department of Taxation and Finance to process tax registration applications and the Department of Labor to set up unemployment tax accounts. You can conservatively add 3 weeks to another month. That means you really need to get started at a minimum of 15 weeks before that employee start date. Any additional delay jeopardizes the firm's ability to onboard and pay that employee. Firms everywhere are running into the same issue. Setting up in each state, especially filing and securing various registrations and accounts across agencies, takes time. With out-of-state registration, it's not practical to wait until you have an employee ready to start. And it's not efficient to repeat the scramble in each new state. Management, and especially HR and legal teams, need to be in lockstep, reviewing the hiring pipeline and ensuring registrations are in order as soon as it becomes feasible. The next area I want to focus on today is renewals. You're all set, they're fully licensed in a new state, but eventually you'll have to renew those licenses. So what does that entail? To start, there are some obligations that every business has that must be renewed regularly. We've touched on each of these already. Qualifier licenses, firm licenses, Secretary of State registrations, and any unique state requirements. Renewal applications usually require proof of good standing from the Secretary of State as well. And keeping all of these up to date is important because there are consequences if a filing is missed. If the business misses even a single filing, it immediately faces consequences that can start with late fees and increase all the way to administrative action and the denial of the right to do business in a state. Administrative action can usually be undone by a process called reinstatement. But the firm pays all back taxes, filing fees, and penalties, but it's a costly and lengthy process. Not to mention the reinstatement becomes part of the business's permanent record. Sometimes firms that have an entity that no longer operates in a state, so they decide they don't want to pay the fees or keep up the obligation to maintain it. Then suddenly they find an opportunity in that state a few months later, but no, they've fallen out of good standing and have to play catch up. They end up paying more in reinstatement fees than the original filing fees. A more cost-effective option would be to have been withdrew the entity and reform qualify, or to maintain an agent and file the necessary annual reports all along. In general, both maintaining an entity and closing it properly are less expensive and less risky than letting it lapse to noncompliance. We've broken down the renewal process into 4 key steps: research, prepare, submit, and monitor. Excuse me. Let's start with research. The most important thing that you can take the time to know exactly what you need to file in order to renew all of your licenses. Yes, that includes most of the materials you originally submitted for your initial application. But requirements can also change year to year as state governments update their processes. Once licensed in a given jurisdiction, your firm will have a license ID numbers, registration dates, renewal deadlines, and continuously changing requirements to navigate. With over 1,500 different AEC filings around the country, keeping up with the changes to requirements can be time consuming. And as the firm grows and becomes licensed in multiple jurisdictions or specialties, the complexity increases. You also have to ensure that you capture any updated information from your registered agent, whether that's new qualifications, update personal information like a change name or address, or just a new registered agent entirely. You also want to check for any changes to your business formation documents, and maybe most importantly, you'll need to check that you only need to check for any changes to your state's forms and fees. In addition to updating the requirements, states are consistently changing their formats of their forms and exactly what information you need to submit. It can be tricky to stay on top of all this. Step two, actually gathering all the updated information to submit with your renewal application. There can be a lot to pull together here, so make sure you leave yourself adequate time and avoid late fees. Nearly every state requires business entities to file an updated annual report to ensure it keeps current information on record. Because each state has a unique deadline, a multi-state business faces deadlines throughout the year. Reports can be due on a yearly or biannual basis. You'll also need to file annual financial statements, along with the proof of your qualifier's license and their continuing education certificates. Make sure you're tracking these in one central location as they're completed throughout the year so that you don't have to hunt them down at renewal time. You'll also need to pull your current scrutiny bonds, surety bonds, and insurance documentation to ensure that those are in good standing and compliant with state requirements. Many states also require the business to file and pay taxes to maintain corporate good standing, such as California, New York, and Texas. Pulling all of these documents together every time you have a renewal deadline, which, as we mentioned, can be at different times of the year for different states, can be a hassle. So it's essential to keep them stored in one central location to expedite that process. The third step in the renewal process is actually submitting your renewal applications. And the most important part of it is to hit your deadlines. You don't want any unnecessary late fees or potential hiccups that could impact your ability to do business. Make sure you're tracking different states, different renewal cycles, whether they're yearly or every 2 years, whether you're there on the first of the month, on the anniversary of your initial licensing, or a different date entirely. Many firms expect their individual engineers to manage their own continuing education and license renewals, but that can increase risk because the firm has no oversight. Because even a single lapse license from a qualifying individual or qualifying engineer can have major consequences, the firm should invest in a solution that, at a minimum, gives management direct insight into the status of practitioners in any state at any time. Finally, be aware that the more jurisdictions you expand into, the more complex and time-consuming this process can be. Be sure you're allocating the proper resources and implementing the right systems to streamline it. Relying on spreadsheets and manual reminders runs the risk of a critical lapse, leading to direct financial penalties. More importantly, it risks a gap in the ability to operate and secure new business. Finally, once you've finished your renewal application and have been approved, you still want to monitor for any changes. As mentioned, state legislators are always passing new regulatory bills and department level changes. It's vital that you stay up to date, which can be a bit overwhelming if you're in multiple states. Some states also require that you file immediate updates to your license if certain events occur. For example, I mentioned earlier that a change in a qualifier requires an updated filing, typically within 30 days, but sometimes as quickly as 10. You need to make sure you know exactly what events will trigger maintenance filings in each state so that you don't miss any deadlines. You also have to ensure that you're maintaining good standing with the Secretary of State and Department of Revenue in each state. That means staying up to date with taxes and fees, maintenance filings, documentation, and more. As I mentioned earlier, Many licensing jurisdictions stipulate that the business maintains internal records and follows certain governance of ownership requirements. These may or may not need to be reported on a license renewal application, but most licensing agencies have the authority to enforce and penalize governance violations. We have one customer who's headquartered in Texas, but they operate in 23 wholly owned subsidiaries across 9 states. As they expanded, they found that subsidiaries weren't keeping their compliance data well organized, and their executive administrator was spending more time on license filings than their primary job responsibilities. Once they switched to our centralized platform, they were able to automate renewals, reporting, and regulatory tasks and track updated requirements easily. To recap, there's a lot to keep track of, especially if you're doing business across multiple states. As you can see on the slide, there are 800 plus AEC licenses, 1,500 plus AEC license filings, 2,000 plus US filing authorities, 20,000 plus unique filings, 50 plus states CE requirements. To best keep track of all of these changing requirements, we recommend a few best practices. First, be sure to conduct a review each and every year. This isn't just a review of your documentation and business information, it's a review of your internal processes. You should be looking regularly to see how you can better manage your internal records to make sure that you are ready to file quickly when the time comes, and that also the appropriate members of your team have access to your latest licenses and upcoming deadlines. Second, make sure to incorporate new requirements into your licensing and compliance management system. All those requirements change. Manual systems like spreadsheets can quickly become outdated, so you'll need to update them regularly. Finally, allow ample time to complete new applications and filings. If there's one thing that you should take away from this presentation, it's not that my speaking ability or my stuttering of words or fumbling over bigger words that I'm not used to saying. It is that the process takes more time than you initially think. So you should never wait until the last minute to start a renewal process. I'm going to put up another poll question, and this is in regards to the license management that you currently have. I'm going to go ahead and launch that now. Leave that up for about a minute or two, and see what comes out on top. Give it another minute or so, just in case anybody's kind of thinking on it a little bit. Again, give this another 30 seconds or so, see if anybody else wants to pop in and submit an answer here. Join the poll. Go ahead and run the poll, share the results. So results are kind of split between spreadsheets and third-party provider. I'm not saying who's in the right there or who's doing who has an easier job. But I'll go ahead and stop sharing that. Again, appreciate the participation in our poll questions. It gives us here some insight on your processes, and then kind of sees, it lets you compare to others within the same call what they're dealing with and how they're taking care of it. So at this point, we've covered key licensing, entity, and tax issues, both as concepts and in example forms. Let's now talk about specific ways a firm can navigate this regulatory environment. It all starts with a proactive and comprehensive system for compliance. As you'll see, it involves a top-down strategy as well as the right people, process, and technology to execute. There are key components of what a proactive compliance system might include. Um, those those include or those are establishing a system for business information records, tracking entity tax and licensing data, managing corporate tax and license filings, maintaining registered agents, and timely notification of key staff. Have a command of the renewals of firm and professional individual licenses, and corporate CE requirements and certifications. Defining internal roles and processes. To be clear, every firm is unique. What we share here is in general in nature and based on our extensive experience working with organizations of all sizes. But we encourage you to take these ideas back to your management teams and legal counsel in order to shape your overall compliance program. Harbor Compliance offers a solution to many of the challenges you heard presented today. We've taken these strategies and built a suite of services and software around them. We've built a cloud-based compliance software and continuously maintain a database of nationwide requirements. It keeps everyone in your organization up to date on your registration status in each state. It provides a secure, efficient, and effective way for your organization to maintain and assess essential compliance information. Of course, organizations that register in multiple states have multiple entities gained additional value. Access to our software is available as part of our managed services or standalone. There are four purpose-built modules: License Manager, Entity Manager, Tax Manager, and Records Manager. So when we talk about needing a single place to manage registration data, records, and reporting deadlines, our software modules do just that. They provide your organization with valuable reporting insight needed to easily assess where your business is registered. So with that, at this point, we want to thank you for joining us today. As I mentioned at the start of our presentation, today's session is eligible for continuing education credit through Earmark. You can use the QR code on your screen now to download the Earmark app, and after the session concludes, we'll email out a 5-question quiz. Once you've completed the quiz, you'll receive your CPE certificate. At this point, we want to thank you for joining us today again and offer you a free compliance score where we'll verify your compliance status for the various business entities you have set up nationwide. If you are interested in getting a free Harbor compliance score, please let us know in the chat box or reach out to us after this presentation. Thank you again for joining us today. Enjoy the rest of your week. I will look at, I don't know if it's open or not, if there's any questions or anything anybody has that they'd like to pose now to see if they can get a quick answer out of me. Again, if you would like information about our services, if you want to talk to an account executive such as myself or others, we have a contact page on the website. Feel free to go there, submit a question. We'll hop on a meeting together, talk about the compliance, talk about your if you're expanding, if you're where you are, you want to talk about switching services from a different provider. We can sort of talk about all those things as well. So I'll leave this up for another couple of minutes here, see if any questions pop in here. If you want to leave, again, appreciate your time today with dealing with my fumbling of words and maybe jumbling of sentences. I appreciate those who stuck around for this. Again, we do these webinars, I think it's once a month. Some of the presenters vary. Most of it is the account executives here at Harbor Compliance, um, and we do the best we can, going through all these slides and talking about our services and our system itself. Leave this up for another couple minutes here just to make sure if anybody's thinking of any questions, you can go ahead and ask them. Be glad to answer anything you have in within reason. Again, I appreciate everybody's time and participation. Webinars are tough because I'm just basically talking with myself with no feedback. So it's a little bit difficult. But I appreciate everybody staying with me this long. All right. I guess there's no questions. Again, if you do want to get in contact with us, please visit our website, harborcompliance.com. Go ahead and submit a contact form. One of our account executives, such as myself, will be happy to answer any questions you have or hop on a call and discuss your compliance, um, and see if we can help at all. Again, appreciate your time today. Have a good rest of your day. Thank you.